Pornography may be the worst thing that is afflicting today's society. In fact, it might be the worst thing that has ever afflicted any society whatsoever, in the just array of terrible things that it does to humanity, ranging from just the industrial aspects of how that it has monetized the sexual exploitation of women and men and children all over the world, and the way that it facilitates the trafficking of men, women, and boys all over the world, and how it also is becoming the go-to criminal enterprise for organizations that otherwise would have trafficked in addictive substances and things like that, simply due to the fact that you can sell a human over and over and over again, whereas you can only sell powder or leaves or whatever else a single time to a single subject. And that's not even getting to the individual aspects of how it warps the human mind into viewing human beings, image bearers of the God that created them, into objects and viewing them as consumable instead of things that are lovable. The way that it unrealistically sets expectations of a person's sexual priorities at younger and younger ages as time continues to go on. The way that it causes people to view their own level of satisfaction in an unrealistic and honestly delusional fashion. Given all of that, enter Pearl Davis, which, if you don't know who that is, it's an chronically online commentator, someone that makes her living saying things on the internet, and as a result, of course, has said all sorts of things. And I don't agree with, nor do I disagree with everything that she said, but she said a lot of things. A few hits that she's come up with is the idea of reversing the 19th Amendment, that women shouldn't be allowed to vote because they're irrational and delusional, which is funny considering she is one of those. Nevertheless, she came out with this comment saying that she believes that more marriages have been saved by the consumption of pornography than have been broken up by it. And I don't know what data she would suggest as evidence for this claim. I don't think there is anything that can be produced in that direction. But I'd imagine in her mental frame that she would view it as that there's a ton of marriages out there full of these men primarily, but also women. Some 28 to 35% of women have professed to be addicted to pornography in some form as well. That there's these individuals in marriages that are sexually boring, sexually dry, that have become monotonous or uninteresting sexually, and so the dissatisfied partner is turning to online or other forms of sexually explicit and exploitative content as a means of nursing their yearning, that they remain married to this person that they view as unsatisfying in this one aspect of the relationship because there are other things that they desire. Now, is this a reasonable assumption? Now, given the pornographication of sexual ethics in today's society, I imagine there are probably a lot of people that are dissatisfied with their level of sexual exchange with their spouse or their long-term partner, whatever. But the idea of them kind of nursing that or medicating that with sexually exploitative and explicit material from the internet or the garbage paperback smut books that women parade around the internet with is not a good solution. See, in an ideal world, what would happen is that people would have a level of reasonable, rational communication and understanding. That, for instance, if your wife has recently had a baby or you have small children that tend to be disruptive of everything in life, they tend to be kind of, let's say, even greedy for attention and time and investment and things, that's going to be disruptive for a young or a family-based couple's ability to be sexually integrated to a level of satisfaction that they might have had before the children were born, or that they might perceive as other people have. That's reasonable because life is often complicated and difficult. And so what you need to do is have a conversation about those things, communicate where you feel like you're being at a deficit, that you are not meeting each other's needs, and try to work together to bring them into balance. That's the ideal sentiment. That'd be the Christian thing to do. Of course, not everyone in our society is a Christian, and that there's plenty of couples that are contemplating divorce on this basis, that they feel like that their spouse is holding out on them, maybe even malignantly. And so they turn to pornography. And the thing about it is that it's actually been studied, and there's a whole bunch of various studies on this about how that men specifically, because those are the most heavily studied on this subject, when they consume pornography, that it erodes the emotional bonding that they have with their spouse, that they begin to become conniving, selfish, and even vindictive as a result. As well as the spouses of men who are addicted to pornography, they tend to become inward, depressed, anxious, these sorts of, like, that they become, I'll think of the word eventually, but it's not the objective influences that this has on the relationship are not good. And you might say that maybe it delays a divorce that would otherwise come sooner, because this dude decides that he would feel himself out instead of something like that narrative maybe. But it doesn't prevent divorce. See, it's been studied, and that women view a man that is consumed with pornography as identical to a man who is unfaithful physically. Because, quite frankly, from a biblical standpoint, and from a real material standpoint, and from a psychological standpoint, he is. They view it as an emotional form of betrayal, that literally turning to another source for satisfaction, fulfillment, or whatever, pleasure, that actually is supposed to belong to her, that is supposed to be her domain. And ironically, men tend to view this in a different way, that men tend to view physical betrayal, like actually banging the handyman, as more of a betrayal than, say, being flirted with or other forms of emotional betrayal. And those are all wide generalizations. Every relationship is unique, and every individual in their response to these things is unique. And you can tie these things into very biological realities of that men don't have the level of certainty about paternality with their children the way that women obviously do. And so that's why there's an ingrained level of priority about physical transaction in the mind of a man as opposed to a woman. This is why women would be more upset about their husband being flirted with, potentially, because they see it as the same thing. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. But given all of that, what I'm getting at is that Pearl Davis is wrong. That porn has never rescued a relationship that was headed for destruction. Porn has never nursed back into health a sickly relationship. It simply has never happened. Instead, what has happened is that people erode their relationship. For example, I was reading a kind of testimonial study set of couples that were open marriages, open relationships, polys, all that kind of stuff. There was just all this variety of different kinds of non-traditional relational dynamics, and all of them said that the open door towards what they're doing now was that they discovered that their partner was consuming pornography on a regular basis. And rather than deciding that they were going to break up the marriage or something, they decided that they would open it instead. And that's where they got into swinging. That's when they got into whatever that stuff was that they are now. Now, you can say that, well, but they're still together. Like that is essentially a cope in this situation. Well, they're still together. But you can't deny that the relationship is not what it once was. And you also can say as well that it's not a healthy dynamic. This is not the kind of relationship that is, it'll always remain on the fringe, is what I'm saying. We probably will have polyamory or polygamy as a legal state, will probably be legalized within my lifetime. But the statistics bear out very clearly still, even global examinations of marriage, that monogamy, one man and one woman forever, is the golden standard for a safe environment for children to grow up in, for a stable economic system, for a society to grow and build upon. The reason I'm talking about all of this is a matter of that it's November 1st, and the annual trend of the No Nut November is beginning, in which people are going to begin to self-starve themselves sexually for the purpose of online credibility or credit or clicks or whatever the absurd reason for that is. Supposedly, Pornhub claims to lose something like $80 billion a year for the following 30 days that we have oncoming. And what I would say to all of those is, why just make it 30 days? Why not continue through to the new year? Why not make it your early kind of doorbuster New Year's resolution that you're going to lay off the pornography? Because it's actually also been studied that just simply choosing not to over time, that once you get to the point of that you no longer feel the craving, that your brain will begin to actually view human beings and human interactions in a different, far more healthy way. You don't need to be enslaved by this thing. You also don't need to subject your relationships to the tyranny of it either. You can be healthy sexually. You can. But the first thing you have to do is sever the addictive tentacles that have been enslaving you.